just in the essence of timing, I'll give another quick overview of Mike for some of the new attendees. We've been having people tune in and out all day. Mike is the CEO of GDA Group of Companies and previously the founder of MLG Blockchain, which was Canada's largest and one of North America's largest token issuance companies. I've worked alongside Mike for quite some time now, and he's firsthand been involved in over $500 million of digital asset raises. And has helped capitalize over $5 billion of assets for digital asset companies, amongst some other notable achievements in traditional markets, helping with M&A and emerging technology. Today, he's going to be having a fireside with Sheldon Inwentash, who we're really privileged to have joining us, discussing traditional investing and the future, taking a small shift from alt asset investments. We're going to be looking further into how traditional investment strategies are changing, and how they're going to look in the future, and Sheldon's perspectives on the subject. And just for time-wise, this is the second to last conversation, so we're a few minutes behind, but we should be finishing all of the event festivities around 1:30. Thanks, guys. I'll let you take it away, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And to introduce Mr. Sheldon Inwentash, who we have, or Inwentash, who we have as our esteemed second last panelist. Sheldon definitely has an extensive career in the business creation, capital markets, and venture capital space. Sheldon has founded over 5 businesses, among them Visible Genetics, Genevest, and his current business, which he's the founder and chief executive officer and chief investment officer for GDA Capital. In addition to that, Sheldon has been at the head of 9 different businesses, including his last venture fund, Pine Tree Capital, which was publicly traded at over $1 billion valuation. So Sheldon has quite the experience and the resume. So for this conversation, we're going to start by going back a bit and looking at or getting some perspective on Sheldon's career, where he came from, and how he got to where he's at now. We're going to reflect on things that investors can do considering the current economic climate with COVID and everything that's happening in the world. And then we're going to take some time to consider where the future is going to be with disruptive technology and where the world is going. So thank you, Sheldon, for joining us. Maybe we could start by just getting you providing some context into your background and how you got to where you are. That'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. And thanks for bringing me on to this forum. It's been a very informative morning, listening to international perspectives. I know this is a fireside chat. My fireplace is downstairs. I hope everybody's keeping warm. And this is a perfect day to do. The one thing I have found in this Zoom environment is that there's no such thing as weekends anymore. I think every day just folds into the next. And if you want to take some time off, do it, because no one's watching. So yeah, listen, I've been around long enough that I've got lots of battle scars. The only way I can say it. I'm a hybrid. If I sort of had to relate myself with everybody here on the phone call today, I guess I would say I've held almost every hat. And that today, GDA Capital, which also is public, and the only reason I believe in public is it's a family office basically, but with some public shareholders that have followed me for a long time, want to participate. But if they want to exit, I don't want to stop that exit and make it a formal exit and make an expensive exit. So people sometimes get on the bus and get off the bus depending on how they feel about my views in the world. And so, listen, I'm different than many people in the creative world and the creative arts. I'm actually a CPA, and also a very significant collector of contemporary art. because I believe that fits into my thinking of the world. So, I spent some time at Price Waterhouse. I did my minimum duty of 3 years. I became an oil and gas analyst at a major life insurance company. Then I bought a big money manager for a life insurance company out of Toronto, managed that in basically, I'll call it the basket clause, which is the high risk area. So I've always had a predisposition for early stage creation where things are disruptive and can make a difference to the world. And I go back to the 80s. So I've lived in a few of these different decades and the evolution of it. The way I think is I always go top down, and I create my own vision of the world. And then I basically go micro depending on how I view that vision. And typically today, my style is that I'm the lead investor in a project, but I'm also an advisor and a strategic driver. So it's a quasi hybrid venture capital role where, you influence companies, but I do so as not the hammer over their heads. I let good people do what they have to do, but I try to give the benefit of the experience. I've personally been involved in over $20 billion of raising of capital for my own ventures. So when I get behind something, capital is absolutely the least important thing to do and to achieve. So, I guess I'm just going to go back 20 years. I can talk about how I founded a nuclear medicine business. I founded the first pharmacogenomics company. Now, a co-founder, I'm the financial guy. So these are biotech deals, one nuclear medicine and the other one in pharmacogenomics, which is basically today the precursor, what is today personalized medicine. So I'm a big believer in biotech, but it's a tough one. And because typically, as everybody knows, you got to pay to see the whole card, which is, does it work? Do your trials work? And then you got to go through the FDA. So I'm involved very, lightly. I'll go into space today, but the big theory or thesis that I came up with, and very close friend of mine, and I work a lot with him, and he's also a CA, and he founded a bunch of funds. His name's Eric Sprott out of Toronto. Is basically we both agreed in 2001 that there was coming an end to an era. It was the beginning of the internet, which is no question was a platform for everything we see today. But also as kind of both accountants and looking at the US balance sheet, maybe it was 15 trillion then, 12 trillion, I'm not sure. But basically countries were spending money poorly, not in our best interest, but in the interests of those who manage that money for their own, I think, personal or optic gain, and maybe some cases more than that. So much capital has been wasted in the world, and the taxpayers and all of us are suffering because of that. So since that time, I tried to look at, and I basically have collaborated a lot with Eric on the alternative to these vast balance sheets or vast debts on their balance sheet that impossible to be repaid. Now, the US dollar is the US brand of currencies, so therefore everybody has to be in it. And that hasn't changed till today. I mean, you got the RMB, which is breaking out probably against the US dollar in some ways, but not very transparent, but definitely with ambition to be that world currency. The euro, I just don't think makes any sense, because I don't believe you can have different cultures and different economies form into one currency. It's too political. So the alternative obviously came up with was gold. I've had about 6 exits on gold, 3 of them over $1 billion, others pretty high. So I was extremely active when I had Pine Tree Capital in the resource space. And the why I was there is because it was hard assets and against US dollar. But a big problem back then, in I'll call it the 2000, 2015, 2010 range, was the manipulation by Morgan Stanley of the gold market. And that really knocked out a lot of the believers, like myself, who don't have the staying power when you have basically banks controlling it, because gold market is actually an extremely small market when you look at it. and central banks were dumping, and it could not be a material central bank currency. Well, so I've always had as part of my DNA thinking that I have to be in assets that are against the US dollar. And so therefore it was gold. And then that, through a long period of time, has evolved into blockchain, I'll call it. Obviously, the word cryptocurrency is misused. And I believe that for the same reasons gold has had its substantial renaissance, so will blockchain. Now, Bitcoin is the brand. I don't view Bitcoin personally as very attractive. I think it's like gold. It's a brand. But I do believe through blockchain, there are going to be thousands of digital alternatives to currency that are going to play roles in supply chain, in peer-to-peer transactions, and so forth, that will allow for more control over everything that we know that blockchain allows one to control, i.e. their identity and encryption, like security, et cetera, but also decentralization and away from banks that, when Bitcoin got, I guess, manufactured and invented in 2008 post the crisis, no one wanted to be caught with their money in Lehman and then everybody else. So I'm a big believer. Now, what's happened that has changed things even to put everything more on steroids has been COVID. And COVID has resulted in my view, a foolish lockdown of these economies. I was against it. I still am. And it happened because the world panicked on a disease they didn't understand and know. And I know enough about how the derivation of these diseases in China, which basically started off by, poor peasant farmers putting pigs and chickens together, and that created these anomalies and permutation, or what do you call it? Rogue mutations into, diseases that there was no cure or vaccine for. And there's a whole history of them. So there will be many more COVIDs. But what COVID did is it freaked everybody out, shut these economies down, and the stimulation to the balance sheet, and let's just talk about America, we're $3-4 trillion, has totally blown open now the whole concept of the devaluation that's real now in the US dollar, but devaluation against what? And this has always been, again, the big issue, as I mentioned earlier. So you have the RMB, which is going to gain strength without question, because the Chinese economy is rebounding, and basically the way that they run their country centralized, I think they will become the masters of international commerce. I see it in Africa. I'm very involved in Africa in the mineral game. So I believe that COVID has been the catalyst for now acceleration in alternative currencies and alternative assets. In addition, this has created or exacerbated what was already the beginning of the digital revolution. And obviously it started with the internet, because without that, nothing could happen. Then broadband, high speed, and all the things that make it easier, user-friendly, and so forth. So through the digital revolution, what have we found? That when the stock market bottomed, and Bill Ackerman, I'm watching him that day step into the market for $3 billion, unwind all his derivatives on shorting the market, go long, buying Starbucks, buying Hilton, buying all these things. He hit it dead on, because everything now that the stock market's made a new high, and people are going, how is that? How is there this detachment between, let's call it the economy and the street, where you want to go to your local restaurant, and all these businesses? Well, what's lost on one hand is gained on the other. And, on this modem here, Zoom, I was watching Zoom at $70, and now like hundreds, and Netflix and so forth. And so I believe, my own feeling is, this has been the most productive year of my life, because I'm focused. I don't have to get on planes every other week and have poor eating habits, et cetera, et cetera. And there's nothing wrong with, spending maybe a bit of quality time with your family. But all that being separate, I believe that this whole digital evolution is going to spawn the new age of companies. And, everything's an app today. Uber started, it's an app. Airbnb, it's an app. We're involved in a company called Peak Positioning, which is an app in China that matches lenders and people that need money. Well, you can't borrow money today from institutions, financial institutions, unless you have money. So if you have a term deposit, they'll gladly allow you to borrow against it. But if you want a mortgage, very difficult, even for the average person's salary, because banks don't lend anymore. So who lends? Private market, credit unions, B banks, and some of the bigger banks. So this company, Peak Positioning, just announced a massive contract today, and they're in China to start with, and it's a platform technology. Another area that's just totally exploding that people don't understand or misunderstand is esports. And esports, if you look at that vertical compared to every other sport in the world, NFL, World Soccer, is the biggest next to it, it dwarfs it by multiples. So one of the companies I got behind is a company called Esports International, good name. It's called, it's actually got a stock symbol, Gamble. And what they are peer-to-peer gambling. So guess what? People can bet on anything in between themselves around sports and around other things. They just announced a deal with the Los Angeles Kings. So guess what? All these bricks and mortar businesses, whether you're a retailer, whether you are a sports team, that the focus is away from that and has to be for survival first, but they will realize that they have brands that can be exploited big time through this whole massive digital revolution that's occurring. So part of my view is also when you have depreciations of currencies, it's akin to inflation. So what's going to happen is I'm not a big fan of real estate, but I'm a fan of raw land, because anything I believe that has debt against it, it's going to get hurt. And obviously, if you're in the retail storefront or office building, everything's going to change. So to me, real estate, no. Oil and gas, we are also extremely involved in disruptive companies that feed into the electric vehicle and green world. And without question, that's happening. It won't stop, and it's growth. So why, it's in the business of stocks, people say don't fight the tape. So why would you fight something that is yesterday's news? So, these traditional bricks and mortar businesses, some are going to be have renaissances for different reasons. And, like the micro lending platform of Peak Positioning, for example. But you look at a company, Beth Baden Bedtime. I thought that was bankrupt 3 years ago. Next thing you know, I'm watching CNBC and the stock doubled in a day, all online. And with COVID now, we've been trying to get a puppy, and we can't get that puppy across the border. And we find out now that 1/3 of Americans want pets. So there's all these things that are changing that I believe are affecting our lives and are affecting our investment habits. And I believe the bottom line at the end of it, on an investing forum, is that digital currencies will reign supreme. But caveat emptor, there's going to be a lot of stuff out there. Yes, governments, they're sticking their nose in and they don't understand it, so they want to stop it. But then they'll figure out that you can't beat it, you're going to have to join it. Gold was, central banks were deaccessioning and selling gold. Now central banks are starting to put it back into their reserve portfolio. And I know a couple central banks that are putting Bitcoin into their central bank portfolio. It's because it's, again, the only digital currency that has a brand that sort of has a, some history. But I believe that the real digital protocols of the future are going to have real value propositions. So you're not just going to go, oh, I'm buying something digital because I don't want to have it in cash. But on the other hand, that digital may have zero utility. And if it doesn't have any utility, in my view, it's not a real business. And so, or it's not a real asset, I should say. So I think that this is, there's going to be, less blood on the streets percentage wise than the last 2017 wake-up call on digital currencies and getting everybody to look at them seriously. But I believe that um, it will be a big part of our future. Now, Mike, I've rambled on here just because when I look at things, I have to go macro and then I drill micro, and I hope I've articulated some of the things people are interested in hearing about, but I'm going to pass it back on to you.
Yeah, that was great context, Sheldon. So a lot to unpack, and we don't have too much time, but it would be great to dive a bit deeper into. So you had a very successful career with traditional asset classes like gold and commodities and like art. And I think in the last maybe 5 or so years, you've shifted your focus to maybe more so for disruptive technologies, but in the last, I guess, 5 years, you've had a huge focus on blockchain technology. So I wonder, and you're still doing some stuff, to my understanding, on with traditional commodities and art, with now more of a disruptive lens. But what was it that, like, was it a conscious shift that you started to focus more on disruptive technologies, or you started to see the curves happening faster? Or what made you choose to shift from more traditional asset classes to the disruptive lens that you currently have?
Well, actually, it's always been in my DNA. I've been doing disruptive technology since 1982, when I did the first, online pricing through Wi-Fi in the store environment. You could find out price per units. I started one of the first 3D software companies in 1992. It was too early because we had to have big silicon graphics boxes. There was no high speed. So there were a lot of barriers to really doing disruptive technology, pre the 2000s, when enabling of this became different. So it's always been part of my DNA. But I hit my head against the wall, not really understanding that you can't live in a vacuum, and the macro infrastructure around you has to be there to ensure that there's a platform for you to succeed. Now, let me just do a caveat here. I collect art because I enjoy it, but I would say that, rate of return wise, it's the best thing I've ever done, just because have a good eye and understand it. And have maybe one of the world's best advisors, but it's my passion. It's really more passion, but you like to be right. So I don't, I don't trade art. I just pretty well buy it. So that's something I enjoy, but I also believe that you're going to see the art market and prices for quality art go through many ceilings. It's going to be priceless. Now, as it comes to hard assets in the mineral side, I'm massively bullish. Okay, I'm quite deeply involved in Africa for certain metals and minerals, but I used to be around the world much more, less so now. But without question, I'm one of the believers that gold is going to the moon because there's no debt against it, and that the silver gold ratio is going to alter so that silver is going to actually to have a catch-up value, because it also has a huge technology input value. So as with blockchain, you can't just do blockchain and survive in this world today, because there is not the appetite, the interest, and so forth. I heard you mention Axia Coin. I'm a big fan of what they are doing. It was a vision of mine forever, and I believe that you're going to have a digital asset that's actually underpinned by things that we can all understand. Many digital currencies, people will not understand. Most people don't understand why Ethereum is worth what Ethereum's worth unless you are a tech person or a very involved, savvy person in blockchain. So that is a very difficult thing. I think with our company, we're involved, in 3D Capital. I believe we're involved with 4 or 5 what I will define as unicorns that have been multi-year initiatives, private, under the radar, not known. Now, along with those, there's a lot of ones that have just gone into the waste basket, because there's been a lot of, I'll say, charlatan types that kind of enter these hot spaces and They all sound smart and so forth. But the one thing I can say is the world is very small now. I mean, for us to have this conversation today, and for example, one of my companies, I do a conference call every Friday morning. It's very interesting. We have people from Hong Kong, Switzerland, South America, very similar to this, except around a particular suite of mineral projects. And it's as though we're sitting next door. And with COVID now, we're willing to accept that. Whereas before, everybody felt that, you'd have to sit across the table and, like in a poker game, sense who these people were and if you could trust them and so forth. And we don't have that luxury anymore, thank goodness. But there are other ways to, I think, check people out and, do track record evaluation and so forth. So anyway, I am in blockchain, but it's, I would say blockchain, minerals, and disruptive tech, which I'm going to include esports, I'm going to include micro lending, I'm going to include other investments that I've made that are going to change the bricks and mortar space, as though when you walk into a store that you're going to be as though you're digital, because you walk into a store today, no one knows who you are. And I'm involved in a transformative technology, which Amazon has an interest in, that's going to change that environment and has now led to multi-contracts, believe it or not, in contact tracing, because it's a very similar technology. And I believe contact tracing, by the way, will be with us forever, because I think people are now sensitive to the fact of how they get diseases, communicality, and, we're going to have some form of distancing, in the back of our mind. Some will think of it more than others.
Yep, it's definitely not going away anytime soon, and is definitely changing up the need and the need for disruptive technology and the landscape around working in general. So we've just got one more minute, so it'd be great to wrap up, Sheldon, with perhaps some final perspectives on where you see the world going, and in particular with disruptive technology, coming from your lens with huge exposure to digital assets, esports, the future of commodities, and yeah, where you see it going in the future, and perhaps if you see anything today that such as for example, the rate of returns with DeFi, or that presents just a better way of handling business that disruptive technology is providing to entrepreneurs and to investors.
Yeah, so let me just say that I believe that, and I've thought this for years, that blockchain, digital assets, currencies, that whole is going to make the world a tremendously more efficient place. And if you look at leakage and supply chains between major corporations that can be plugged in, and so because it's immutable, and you don't need middle people, that you're going to be able to do transactions at a cost a fraction of what they are today. And what that's signaling, and I believe the stock market has that built in somewhere to a small degree, is these companies are going to become way more profitable than they ever have been. And so I believe it's all basically on the enabling factor through disruptive technologies that are going to allow for these to become commercial, not ideas, not technology looking for a market. So I believe it's all driven by, and whether it goes to esports or micro lending in China or anywhere else, so people can get money where they have found it difficult to get money. I believe that this is going to be exacerbated by disruptive technologies. And the competing part of that, yes, is sort of gold, but I'm not actually as much of a fan of gold today as I am of, say, disruptive hard assets, using, like, finding nickel. If you found a nickel mine today, the value to Elon Musk and at Tesla is enormous. Rare earths, someone mentioned rare earths. I'm very, very involved with rare earths, understanding their value. But again, rare earths are going to go into technologies and products that we haven't seen before. And it's going to change airline industry by changing how light an aircraft can be and how efficient it can be. So this is another part of what I'm going to say, quote unquote, is a paradigm shift in the world today. But underpinning all that is the word technology. And that can't be underestimated. It is just so deep. And I believe that most people look at the half a dozen companies that are shown up on the screen every day, whether it's Apple, whatever, and they believe that, you know, that's what it is. Those companies are, they're not dinosaurs. That's a really bad word to say, but there are thousands of young emerging businesses that have disruption that those companies are going to have to acquire or compete with. And unless they're broken up, and that's obviously a function of today's discussion, you're going to find the next WhatsApp is not going to be a centralized app. I think it's going to be decentralized. And one I like is, Brock Pierce's wife, Crystal, has an app called Sense, which is in beta right now. And we're part of that beta. And we're going to be able to communicate with people. No one's going to see the conversation. You can't even get into the conversation unless you're vouched for. So no bots and spams. And it's just a secure way of us communicating. You know, this is not a very secure forum that we're on here, but that's okay because we don't want it to be. So I believe it's going to enter every aspect of our life, but the word technology is what drives the underlying hard assets, whether it be rare earths, or nickel or whatever traditional commodities are. So I'm extremely bullish. Like, I couldn't look at the world more fondly than ever. And I believe COVID is a scourge, but in some ways it will be a godsend when one looks back in retrospect somewhere down the line and looked at the catalyst changes that occurred because of it in the world today, including healthcare.
Very exciting.
Telehealth, everything. It's all changing.
Indeed, and super quickly. Thanks, Sheldon, for taking the time to share your perspectives here. It was great to have this conversation.
Yeah, appreciate being here. Thanks.
And Zach, take it away.